Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Adobe Chief Marketing Officer, Ann Lewnes.
Good morning, and welcome to day 2 at MAX. How's everybody doing? All right. One of the best things about MAX is getting to see creativity in action. Whether it was yesterday on the main stage, or in the breakouts, or in the community pavilion, you are seeing the best of the best. So behind me, you see some images from right here in the community pavilion. So if you haven't stopped by there, it is amazing. Please do so today, and you'll be totally blown away. But now, we are going to hear from 5 of the most creative, inspiring, and talented creators of our time. These are people who are just like you, masters of their craft, breaking barriers in both traditional and new creative mediums. They're going to share their work, and they're going to give you insight into their creative process, the highs, the lows, the triumphs, and the tribulations. I promise that you're going to leave excited and energized to go off and create your next project and go share it with the world. So with that, let's get started. First up, we have comic book legend, Nicola Scott. Nicola started her career in 2001 in comics, and she quickly became a fan favorite with her work on iconic characters, including Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. So please join me in welcoming Nicola Scott to the stage.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Nicola Scott, and I draw comic books for a living. So my routine every day is I sit down once I've woken up, and I put on a fresh pair of pajamas. I sit down at my little desk in my little sunroom, and I get to bring to life the epic adventures of some of the most iconic fictional characters of the last 100 years. We're talking superheroes, gods, monsters, space pirates, you name it, I get to draw it. I feel like my job is so fully creatively satisfying. It's such a joy and a privilege. Now, breaking into creative fields, as you all know, everyone's got their own story. And while, I'll tell you mine today, everybody in every creative field has had their jumps and their hurdles along the way. And in every creative field, there are always those people who just don't catch that lucky break, who stumble away, they just don't catch it, and then they're left sort of without knowing what to do next. And I have one of those stories too. Sorry. I didn't always read comics when I was growing up. In fact, when I was little, I didn't even know they existed. But I did know superheroes. Superheroes were sort of quite a lot on TV in the 70s and in film, and that was my introduction. My very first superhero was Wonder Woman. And the way I experienced her for the very first time was through TV. I remember the experience incredibly well. It was the mid-70s. I was at my cousin's place with my sisters, so that's myself, my 2 sisters, and my 3 female cousins. That's the 6 little girls sitting on a sofa. Now, the 5 of them, they're all sort of in their sort of early tween years, and they were just at that age where everything was just getting that little bit too embarrassing. But I was the baby by quite a lot. I was 4 and a half. And we were sitting there, we were watching Lost in Space, and when that ended, a new show started. And by the time Linda Carter was running around, hurling bad guys and deflecting bullets, the 5 of them, they were all out. They were hard pass. This was not for them. But for me, it was everything. It was like I discovered religion. It changed the game for me. So there I was watching this show, and I learned how to tell the time, and I learned how to use the TV guide because of this show. And she was then my gateway drug to all other superheroes. I learned about Superman, I learned about Batman, I watched the Shazam and Isis Hour, I watched Electra Woman and Dynagirl. There were some crazy superhero shows on in the 70s. And they were my gateway. So Wonder Woman opened up that door. And I used to draw her all the time because I come from a creative family. My mother was an artist, my grandmother was an artist, both of my sisters were creative in their way. And I kind of followed after my mum's footsteps quite a bit. She was an illustrator and she painted in every medium and she was very creative all round. And so because of that, she would drag me along to classes that she would attend and that she would teach when I was little, like I was 5. And she would take me along to life drawing classes and she'd give me paper and charcoal and she'd tell me to draw the model. I spent most of my time putting like big hair and knee-high boots on all of her beautiful fleshy ladies. But eventually she started getting me to draw the model. And while, it didn't seem like terribly much fun, I did find myself absorbing that information. And then as I was growing up, every school holidays, Mum would sort of set aside a few days to teach me something more about art. She'd teach me about 2- and 3-point perspective. She taught me about light and shade. She'd teach me about the color wheel. And this was during my school holidays, so it felt like a bit of a drag, but at the same time, I was still learning about art, and it was absorbing. It was absorbing. And so, as that time went on, you'd think that that was kind of where my life was heading, because art was something that I did all the time. But no, I kind of wanted to be an actor. So when I was about 11 years old, I was cast in as the lead in the school play, and that was it. I was hooked. I was all in. So from then on, my parents sort of being great facilitators of all the things that we were interested in, they sent me off to workshops on the holidays. They would send me to acting classes. I got to major in acting at a performing arts high school. That was crazy for me. And then I went to an adult acting school after. And acting became my life. That was where my passion was. It was where my motivation was. What I hadn't quite worked out, though, was strategy. I hadn't worked out how to turn all of this, newfound skill and training into a career. And that was a little bit because my sisters, who were both creative, they had instant success in their creative careers. Now, they were in their early 20s when I was still a teenager, and so their success really impacted me. My elder sister is a graphic designer, and by the time I was 15, she was winning major awards. She was a big deal. And my middle sister, who was a couple of years younger than her, she had a top 40 album by the time I was 18. So, they set a really unrealistic precedence of how success just falls in your lap. And so here am I thinking, acting will just come. I'll do the work. I love doing the work. I love working hard. But it didn't just come. And so I was sort of left there thinking, what the hell do I do now? It wasn't rolling. By the time I was 27, I was only 27, I felt burnt out. I was going to audition after audition, and it just wasn't happening for me. So without any sense of strategy, without any sense of direction on how to build a career, I found myself needing to put that passion in a box and push that box under the bed and just realize that I needed to forget about that for a while and do something else. So I was left with the what else? What else? What else can I do? At the time, I was working in hospitality, like all good actors do. And that was going pretty well for me. I was working in really good places. I was making pretty good money. In Australia, we've got a great minimum wage. It was going well, and it was like hosting a party every night, but it wasn't really creatively satisfying. I knew I didn't want to be doing this long term. So I was facing this thing of, what else can I do? My mother, who taught me everything that I know, she taught me how to sew. So in theatre, I'd made a lot of my own costumes. I've made a lot of my castmates' costumes. I was making a lot of my own clothes, and I even at one point made my best friend's wedding dress. It was very smart. And so I sort of was exploring the different ways that might bring me an income, that I might be able to find some creative satisfaction through sewing. So I explored all of those options, the ones that I could see, the ones that seemed to sort of jump out to me. So I was thinking about costume design. I explored fashion design. I was, thinking about working with brides. That sounded horrific. And so eventually I was just sort of like, I don't know that there's anything here for me. Now, I still didn't, at this point in time, have any real geeky friends. So I had no idea that cosplay was a thing. I don't think it was an industry back then, but I'm kind of lucky. I feel like I dodged a bullet, because if I got into cosplay, I would have got right into it, and then I would have aged out of it almost immediately, because I was getting really close to 30. So that left me with, well, drawing. I can draw. What the hell am I going to do with drawing? And then I explored that for a little while. So my elder sister, the graphic designer, she had, thrown me some odd jobs here and there, and I found myself sort of working out, what's satisfying there. None of the jobs that she'd given me were terribly interesting. They were all work for hire. I was having to draw things for other people, and that was just not at all exciting and not thrilling, and I could see other people that were getting sort of creative satisfaction from their illustrations, but I couldn't see myself in their position. And so I spent quite a lot of time thinking about, what can I do with drawing? Then, one Sunday morning, I had a legitimate light bulb moment. I was sitting down to breakfast, having my tea and toast, and contemplating the question, yet again, what the hell am I going to do? I'm getting really close to 30. And this light bulb moment came in the form of reforming the question. Instead of asking myself, what can I do with drawing? I asked myself, what do I want to do with drawing? What do I want to draw? And straight away, I thought, oh my God, I wish I could just draw Wonder Woman. Because up until that day, I still drew Wonder Woman all the time. Because this was landline times, a fixed phone with a notepad next to it. I would sit down on the phone, and I would draw a beautiful, luscious eye with great lashes and an arched brow. And I would then draw the other eye. I'd draw the rest of the face. I put some beautiful hair on it. But it wasn't finished until I whacked a Wonder Woman tiara on her face. And then it was like, there, now it's done. So I was drawing her all the time. And so in 1 second, I'm thinking, I wish I could just draw Wonder Woman every day. And the very next second, I'm thinking, whoa, hang on. That's actually a job. That's a job that someone somewhere in the world has that job right now. Because Wonder Woman has a comic book, right? And comic books are full of superheroes. That's where superheroes come from. They come from comic books. Oh my God, I'm going to draw comic books. That's it. And that was it. That was the moment. It changed everything. 20 minutes later, I was in a comic book store, and I only knew where there was one because it was just up the road from my parents' place. I passed it all the time. I never went in because it didn't feel like it was for me. I'd see superheroes, and I'd think, I love superheroes, there they are. But, that's not my world. But suddenly, it was like, bugger this, it's my world. And so I went in, I bought up loads of books, anything that had Wonder Woman in it, anything that had superheroes that I recognized, and that started my education. Now, my very first geeky friend, who I met that day, was Douglas Holgate, who worked in the comic book store. He's now a really famous kids' book illustrator. But at the time, that was his job, and he told me about how he makes his own books, and he takes them to conventions, and he sells them, and he shows off his portfolio, and I'm like, conventions, portfolios? Oh my God, what is this brave new world? And so, he introduced me to other local creators in Australia, and they were my sort of first educators on the subject. And through them, what I kind of discovered was that I was probably in the wrong country, I was definitely in the wrong hemisphere, and a good chance I was the wrong gender. So, it was sort of like, well, I've decided I'm going to do this anyway. So, their general sort of piece of information that they imparted, the bit that I took on the most, was that, forget it, you can't make a living here in Australia, the population is too small to support an industry, you have to go to America. And so that's what I did. I bought a ticket to America, and they were like, what, you can just do that? And I was like, yeah, let's go. And I bought a ticket to San Diego Comic-Con. This is back in the day when you could just buy a ticket to San Diego Comic-Con. And off I went. Now, it is a lot bigger now than it was back in 2001. But it was still super duper overwhelming for me. But there I was, my first time with my first timer's portfolio, which was kind of garbage. looking at all of this sea of people. At least 1,000 people in that crowd were walking around with portfolios trying to get work, trying to hustle. And I was just one of them. And that was thoroughly overwhelming. But, you know, you just have to suck it up and do it. And so I did. And my portfolio got annihilated, just like everybody else's that I could see around me. But I came away from that experience knowing exactly what I needed to do. I felt like I really needed to be back in next year, and I knew what my portfolio should have, and I spent that next year building up as big a body of work as I could. I'd sold my car, I'd reduced my outgoings so that I could have as much time to focus on drawing, and I went back the next year and I got 3 jobs. They were all small fry, but they were something. I was starting to build a body of work. So, the second time, and then, more than just the creative thing. I needed to be better than just the creative thing. This was the thing that was starting to be different for me than when I was an actor. I was starting to have that sense of strategy. I'd never had that as an actor. I was just waiting for auditions. This time, I got aggressive. It was like, now I know what I need to do, and I was learning about this industry from a blank slate, ground-up perspective. And so that sort of left me in a less emotional position. I could just be quite sort of focused on what I wanted and how I was going to get there. So I was building up this body of work over the next few years, getting little gigs here and there. So the second time, so from the very first time I was going, I was seeing editors at DC Comics because DC Comics was the home of Wonder Woman. And obviously she was my goal. She was the reason why I was sort of getting into this business in the first place. And so they were, over the years, they started getting familiar with me. Like, there are always hundreds of people trying to get their attention, loads of people who've got their portfolios trying to get work. But they were starting to remember me because they hadn't yet experienced this many sort of tall, loud Australian women coming at them. And, and so they were starting to get a little more confident with me as well. They would see that I was back every year. They could see that I had listened to the advice that they'd given me the year before. And they were starting to sort of trust that I was in this for real, that I wasn't some flake that was going to sort of get spooked by rejection and never come back. So I had that sort of slowly but surely building. But what I really had in my favor was that I had a bunch of writers online who'd seen my work. You know, this is pre-social media. This was sort of back when there were forums. They'd seen my work online, and they were starting to ask about me through their editors, asking for me to work on their books. And I had no idea about this. This was another thing that I was starting to discover is, as I was building my strategy, every year I would slightly reformulate what my strategy was to get me back to DC Comics. You know, some of the work I was taking wasn't even comics at all. But with every job, a slight course correction kept me on my path. And these editors were the ones who were sort of keeping an eye on me and seeing it all happen. So one time at San Diego, this was probably about my 4th or 5th time, I think, I was there, I was shopping myself around as usual, and on the very last day, when after a long week of only getting a few nibbles, on the very last day, in the afternoon, when it's dying down and I'm getting ready to leave, the most serendipitous of timing happened. An editor who I'd never met before at DC Comics approached me to draw Birds of Prey, which is a superhero girl gang book in Gotham City. It's perfect for me. Now, I'd been at that show that year trying to get just any job that was 4 to 6 issues, because at the time, I'd only ever done 2 consecutive issues. So I still didn't know if I could actually do this job. But here I was getting a monthly book at my goal company, and it was a title that was perfectly tailored to me with one of the fastest rising female writers in the industry. And so this was a huge chance. There was no way I was going to blow it. So I was just all in. I just fully committed to it. I was working 7 days a week, about 10 hours a day, just to get in there. And it worked. I did really well. They loved me. And within that first year, they signed me to an exclusive contract, which kept me sort of in the DC family. It meant that I was always going to have work coming in. Now, through my first few years at DC Comics, I was jumping from title to title, and it was all going pretty well. I was on that hamster wheel of, producing 22 pages of art every month, and I was quite happy about it. But after a while, I started realizing, this can't be it, right? I'm really enjoying it, and I'm really grateful, and it's very satisfying, but there's more, right? Because I can see that there's a different level of creators. There are people who've sort of broken into this elite level, this A-list. And I was wondering how they could do that. I was wondering if I could do that. And so I started asking some really basic questions again. I had lost all humility in terms of sort of finding out about this whole industry. They had seen me coming, that I was so green. But, a lot of people humored me, and they gave me all the time I needed. And they said that you needed to sort of work into a creator-owned industry. And so I did. I broke into that. I left DC Comics voluntarily to go and do Blackmagic, a creator-owned series with Greg Rucka, who was, by that time, a long-time collaborator of mine and a great friend. Now, that was going really well for us, and we were working away, but my dream project of Wonder Woman still hadn't really surfaced. And that was one of those things that was sort of, a little bit breaking my heart. And then in 2016, out of nowhere, because I'd left the company and so had Greg, we got that call. It was Wonder Woman's 75th anniversary, and they needed people that they trusted to shepherd her in to this fast-approaching, high-profile era. And so they called Greg and I, and they said, we trust you to do everything that you feel like you need to do to treat this character right, because all eyes are on her. She hadn't been fashionable for such a long time, but suddenly she was in the zeitgeist again, and we were getting to ride that wave. So, that changed the game for me. Being able to work on Wonder Woman, being able to work on Blackmagic, that did change the game for me. I was on a different level. And now it's got me thinking and re-strategizing again. What's next? What can I do next? What can I do with this sort of newfound sort of freedom and access? What can I do to bring the industry? What can I provide to them that, somebody else can't? And I've got those wheels turning. It's been very lucky. I've been very lucky. This industry has treated me incredibly well. And the nature of being able to create on a daily basis and be so creatively satisfied is such a joy and a privilege. And thank you very much.